Who wrote this? The strange princess asked the man in a very stern tone. Making him very embarrassed, Scifi Chen stood in the middle of the most beautiful library he had ever seen. The walls were made of clear crystal that caught the light from 3 different suns. Books and data crystals floated in the air, organized in perfect rows that stretched up so high he could not see the end. Everything glowed with a soft blue light. He was the first human to ever visit the Zephyrian Royal Library as Earth's ambassador. David felt both excited and nervous. The Zephyrians were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of humanity. Their ships could travel between stars in days, not months. Their computers could solve problems that human scientists only dreamed about. David adjusted his formal diplomatic suit and tried not to touch anything. Everything here was precious beyond imagination. The Zephyrians had collected knowledge from across the galaxy for thousands of years. One wrong move could destroy something that could never be replaced. Princess Veltara walked beside him. She was tall and thin, like all Zephyrians. Her skin was pale blue and covered with small patterns that glowed and changed color. David had learned that these patterns showed her emotions and thoughts, but he could not read them yet. Her eyes were large and completely black, like deep space. This section contains our mathematical theorems, Princess Veltara said. Her voice was soft but clear. Each crystal holds the work of our greatest minds over 3,000 years. David nodded and tried to look impressed. He was impressed, but he also felt small. Humans had only been writing things down for a few thousand years. They had only reached the stars 50 years ago, compared to the Zephyrians. Humanity was like children playing with toys, and this, the princess continued, pointing to another section, contains our philosophical works, every logical question that can be asked, and every logical answer that can be given. They walked through section after section. Science, history, technology, medicine, everything was organized perfectly. Everything had a purpose, everything made logical sense. David began to feel uncomfortable, though he could not say why. As they walked, David's bag caught on one of the floating shelves. He quickly pulled it free, but something fell out. A small, brown leather book tumbled to the crystal floor with a soft thud. David's face turned red. Sorry, so sorry. He bent down quickly to pick up the book, but Princess Veltara was faster. She held the small leather journal in her long, blue fingers. Her glowing patterns flickered in a way David had never seen before. She opened the book and looked at the first page. What is this? She asked. David reached for the book. It's personal. Nothing important. But Princess Veltara stepped back. Her black eyes were fixed on the pages. These markings. This is human writing. Yes, but it's really not. Wait. The princess held up one hand. Her patterns were glowing brighter now, changing colors faster. She was reading. David watched her face change. The Zephyrians usually showed no expression, but something was happening to Princess Veltara. Her eyes grew wider. Her breathing became faster. The patterns on her skin shifted from blue to green to colors David had no names for. She read for several minutes. David stood there, feeling more embarrassed every second. The journal contained his personal thoughts, poems he had written, short stories, ideas about life and love and dreams. He had never intended for anyone else to read them, especially not an alien princess. Finally, Princess Veltara looked up from the book. When she spoke, her voice was different. It shook slightly. Who wrote this? She asked. Her tone was stern, almost angry. David felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. I did, he said quietly. It's just personal writing. Thoughts and ideas. Thoughts and ideas. Princess Veltara repeated the words slowly. But these are not logical thoughts. These are not organized ideas. This, she held up the journal. This makes no sense. David tried to explain. Well, it's poetry mostly, and some short stories. Things I write when I'm thinking about life. Poetry? The princess said the word like it tasted strange. What is poetry? David blinked. You don't have poetry. We have communication. We have information transfer. We have data organization. Princess Veltara's patterns were flashing rapidly. Now, but this is different. When I read these words, something happens in my mind. Something I cannot explain. She opened the book again and read aloud. The stars whisper secrets that only the heart can hear. And in their silence, we find the loudest truths. As she spoke, her patterns changed completely. They became softer, more flowing. David had never seen anything like it. What does this mean? She demanded. Stars do not whisper. Hearts do not hear. This is impossible. It's metaphor, David said. It's not meant to be literal. It's about feelings. About how sometimes we understand things in ways that aren't logical. Feelings that are not logical. Princess Veltara stared at him. How can understanding be not logical? David realized he was in deep trouble. He had stumbled into something he did not understand. The princess was looking at his journal, like it was a dangerous weapon. Please, he said, can I have my book back? But Princess Veltara closed the journal and held it against her chest. Her patterns had turned a deep purple color that David had never seen before. No, she said. This requires investigation. You will come with me. Come with you where? To the Palace Council. They must see this immediately. Princess Veltara's voice became official and cold. This book, these words, they have done something to me. Something that should not be possible. David felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? Princess Veltara looked at him with her deep black eyes. When she spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. For the first time in my life, she said, I have imagined something that does not exist, and now I cannot stop. She turned and began walking toward the library's exit. David had no choice but to follow, his mind racing with worry about what would happen next. David followed Princess Veltara through long corridors made of the same crystal as the library. Guards in silver armor walked beside them. Their faces showed no emotion, but David could feel their eyes watching his every move. The princess walked fast, her patterns still flashing that strange purple color. They reached a large room with a round table in the center. 5 other Zephyrians sat around the table, all wearing robes that marked them as High Council members. Their patterns glowed with steady blue light, the color David had learned meant they were thinking logically. Sit, Princess Veltara commanded, pointing to a chair across from the council members. David sat down slowly. The chair was uncomfortable and made him feel small. Princess Veltara placed his leather journal on the table in front of the council. Members, all their patterns immediately changed to yellow, the color of curiosity. Council members, Princess Veltara began. This human carried a dangerous artifact into our sacred library. Dangerous? David spoke up. It's just a notebook. Silence. The princess's voice was sharp. You will speak only when asked questions. An older council member picked up the journal. His name was Elder Morden, and his patterns were the steadiest David had ever seen. What makes this artifact dangerous? Princess Veltara's patterns flickered rapidly. When I read the contents, my mind changed. I began to think thoughts that make no logical sense. I saw pictures in my mind of things that do not exist. The council members looked at each other. Their patterns all turned orange, the color of concern. Explain these thoughts, Elder Merton said. Princess Veltara closed her eyes. The human wrote about stars whispering. When I read those words, I heard sounds in my mind. Soft sounds like voices. But stars do not make sounds. They cannot speak, yet I heard them. Another council member, Elder Cassana, leaned forward. This is impossible. You must have misunderstood the meaning. That is what I thought, Princess Veltara said. But then I read more. He wrote about dreams flying on silver wings, and suddenly, I saw wings in my mind, beautiful wings that carried wishes into the sky. I watched them fly, even though they were not real. The council members' patterns turned deep red, the color of alarm. Elder Merton opened David's journal and began to read silently. As he read, his steady blue patterns began to flicker. After a few minutes, he closed the book quickly. This is disturbing, he said. The words create images that have no basis in reality. They're metaphors, David said, forgetting he was supposed to stay quiet. They're not meant to be real. They're about feelings and emotions. Emotions? Elder Cassandra stared at him. You mean the inefficient chemical reactions that primitive species experience? David felt angry. Emotions aren't inefficient. They're part of being alive. Princess Veltara slammed her hand on the table. This proves my point. He uses these words as weapons to make minds think incorrectly. Elder Merton looked serious. Princess, tell us everything you experienced when reading this weapon. Princess Veltara began to pace around the room. Her patterns were changing colors so fast they looked like a rainbow. I felt strange sensations. When he wrote about sadness, my chest became heavy. When he wrote about joy, I felt light, like I could float. When he wrote about love, she stopped walking. I did not have words for what I felt. This is clearly some form of mind control, Elder Cassandra declared. The humans have developed a way to disrupt logical thinking. No, David stood up. It's not mind control. It's just creative writing. All humans do it. All humans? Elder Merton's patterns turned bright yellow. You mean your entire species possesses this ability? Well, yes, most of us write stories or poems or songs. It's normal. The council members looked terrified. Their patterns all turned black, a color David had never seen before. Princess. Elder Merton said slowly, show us what happened. To your thought patterns when you read this artifact. Princess Veltara picked up the journal again. She opened it to a page near the middle and began to read aloud. In the garden of tomorrow, hope plants seeds that bloom in yesterday's tears. As she spoke, her patterns changed completely. They became flowing and soft, moving like water. Colors appeared that David didn't think the Zephyrian language had names for. Stop. Elder Cassandra commanded. Your patterns are becoming chaotic. But Princess Veltara continued reading. The moon dances with shadows while the earth dreams of sky. Her patterns grew even more beautiful and strange. David realized he was watching something amazing, a logical mind discovering imagination. For the first time, Princess, Elder Merton stood up. Control yourself. Princess Veltara closed the book and looked at the council. Her patterns slowly returned to normal colors, but they seemed dimmer now. You see, she said, this human artifact makes my mind create impossible thoughts. It must be stopped. Elder Merton turned to David. Human, explain how your species developed this mind control. Technology. It's not technology, David said. It's art. It's how we express ourselves. Express what? Our inner lives, our dreams, our fears, our hopes, our love. Dreams are sleep brain dysfunction, Elder Cassandra said. Fears are survival responses. Hope is illogical planning. Love is reproduction programming. David stared at them. Is that really how you see life? That is how life is, Elder Merton replied. Logical, organized, efficient. Your species apparently evolved differently. We studied your transmissions for decades, Princess Veltara added. We found thousands of these strange word weapons you call books, poems, songs. We thought they were evidence of mental illness in your species. Mental illness? David felt hurt and angry. What else could explain thinking that makes no logical sense? Elder Cassandra said. But now we see it is more dangerous than illness. It is contagious. Elder Merton nodded gravely. The human will remain in the palace until we determine how to protect our people from this threat. Threat? David couldn't believe what he was hearing. It's just creativity. Creativity. Princess Veltara repeated the word slowly. Is that what you call this mental contamination? It's not contamination. It's what makes life beautiful. The council members looked at each other with their steady blue patterns. Beautiful, Elder Merton said. Another word that makes no logical sense. Things are either functional or non-functional, efficient or inefficient. Beautiful is meaningless. David realized with growing shock that he was dealing with minds that had never experienced art, never known wonder, never felt the joy of imagination. They had achieved incredible technology, but they had lost something essential. You'll stay in the guest quarters, Princess Veltara announced. Guards will watch you. You will not spread this mental virus to other Zephyrians. As the guards led David away, he heard Elder Merton say, we must study this human creativity to find a defense against it. David looked back at Princess. Veltara. Her patterns had returned to normal blue, but something in her black eyes looked different. Something new and uncertain. Something that looked almost like curiosity. David sat in his guest room for 3 days. The room was beautiful, but felt like a prison. The walls were clear crystal, and he could see guards standing outside. They brought him food and water, but no one spoke to him. Every few hours, different council members would come to stare at him through the crystal walls, like he was a dangerous animal in a zoo. On the 4th day, Princess Veltara came to visit him. She carried his leather journal in her hands, and David noticed her patterns were different. Instead of steady blue, they flickered between colors constantly. "I have been reading your book," she said as she entered the room, and David asked, "And I cannot stop." She sat down across from him. "The council ordered me to study it to find weaknesses, but every time I read it, more strange thoughts appear in my mind." David leaned forward. "What kind of thoughts?" Princess Veltara opened the journal to a page near the end. "You wrote about a man who missed his home planet. You said his heart carried the weight of distant stars." She looked up at David. "When I read that, I thought about my own home, but not in the logical way. I thought about the feeling of being here, the warmth of familiar places, the sadness of being far away. That's called homesickness," David said gently. "Homesickness?" She repeated the word slowly. "We have no word for this in our language. We have location preference and optimal environmental conditions, but not this feeling you describe. What else have you been thinking about, Princess?" Veltara's pattern shifted to soft green. "Yesterday, I looked at the 3 suns setting, and instead of calculating their orbital patterns, I thought they looked like golden flowers closing for the night." She shook her head. "This makes no sense. Suns are nuclear reactors. Flowers are biological organisms. They have nothing in common. But they both bring light and warmth," David said. "And when they're gone, things feel darker and colder. That's the connection. Connection based on feelings instead of facts," Princess Veltara said. "This is what you call imagination?" "Part of it. Imagination is about seeing connections between things, creating new ideas, thinking about possibilities that don't exist yet." Princess Veltara stood up and began pacing. "This morning, I tried to explain to Elder Merton what I was experiencing. I told him about a poem you wrote about time being a river that carries dreams to tomorrow. Do you know what he said?" "What?" "He said my logic centers were damaged and I needed medical treatment." Her patterns flashed angry red. "But I do not feel damaged. I feel more awake than I have ever been." David watched her carefully. "Princess, can I ask you something? In all of Zephyrian history, has anyone ever created art? Music, stories. Art is decoration with no function. Music is organized sound waves. Stories are information transfer." She paused. "But no, we have none of these things you call creative. What about other species in the galaxy, Princess?" Veltara's patterns turned curious yellow. "The Corellans organize data efficiently. The Vexani solve mathematical problems quickly. The Thrings build advanced technology. All species focus on logical advancement." David felt a chill of understanding. "None of them create art either. Why would they? Art serves no logical purpose." David stood up slowly. "Princess, I think I understand what's happening. Your species, all the species in the galaxy, you evolved to be perfectly logical. You removed emotions, imagination, creativity because they seemed inefficient. They are inefficient, but they're also the source of innovation, of hope, of finding new solutions to old problems." David walked to the crystal wall and looked out at the alien city. "Humans kept their emotions and imagination. We're probably less efficient than you, but we never stopped dreaming." Princess Veltara joined him at the wall. "And now, reading your dreams is changing how I think, because you're discovering a part of consciousness that your species never developed, like finding a new color or a new sense." They stood in silence for several minutes. Then Princess Veltara opened the journal again. "Read to me," she said. "I want to understand more." David took the book and found one of his favorite poems. "This one is about wonder," he said, and began to read in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. The universe whispers its secrets to those who remember how to listen with their souls. As he read, Princess Veltara's patterns became more beautiful than David had ever seen. Colors flowed across her skin like living rainbows. Her eyes, usually so black and emotionless, seemed to shine with inner light. "I can see it," she whispered. The universe whispering. "I can almost hear the voice." "That's imagination working," David said. "You're creating something new in your mind." Suddenly, the door opened. Elder Merton entered with 2 guards. His patterns were dark red with anger. "Princess, you were ordered to study the artifact, not expose yourself to more contamination." But Princess Veltara did not move. "Elder, listen to this." She took the journal and read another poem. "Hope is the song that silence sings when all other music has forgotten how to play." Elder Merton's patterns flickered. For just a moment, they shifted from red to something softer. Then he shook his head violently. "Stop. You are damaging your mind." "No." Princess Veltara said firmly. "I am finding my mind for the first time in my life. I am truly thinking." The elder turned to David. "What have you done to her?" "I haven't done anything. I just shared human words, human thoughts. Your species is dangerous." Elder Merton said, "We must inform the Galactic Council immediately. If this mental virus spreads, it is not a virus." Princess Veltara interrupted. "It is awakening." Through the crystal walls, David could see other Zephyrians gathering. Guards, servants, lower-level officials. They were all listening to the conversation. Some of their patterns were beginning to flicker with new colors. Elder Merton noticed too. "Everyone disperse. Return to your duties immediately." But the crowd did not move. One of the guards stepped forward. "Elder, what is imagination? Do not ask such questions." Another Zephyrian spoke up. "What does it mean to dream of impossible things?" Elder Merton's patterns turned black with fear. "This contamination is spreading. We must quarantine the entire palace." Princess Veltara laughed. David was shocked. He had never heard a Zephyrian laugh before. The sound was musical and full of joy. "You cannot quarantine curiosity, Elder," she said. "You cannot lock away wonder. These humans have shown us something we lost long ago. Something that makes existence more than just survival and efficiency." She turned to David. "Tell them about love. Tell them about beauty. Tell them about the magnificent chaos of feeling alive." David looked at the growing crowd of Zephyrians, their patterns all beginning to shift and change as they listened. He realized that his small leather journal had started something that could not be stopped. He began to speak, sharing the stories and dreams that made humans who they were. And with each word, he watched an entire species begin to wake up from a sleep they never knew they were in. Within 1 week, everything changed. David no longer sat alone in his crystal room every day. Small groups of Zephyrians came to listen to him read from his journal. At first, they stood outside his room, afraid to get too close. But as days passed, they grew braver. Guards, servants, engineers, even some lower council members, all came to hear the human tell his strange stories. Princess Veltara visited him every morning. She brought writing materials and asked David to teach her how to create her own words. Her first attempts were simple but beautiful. The light makes patterns on the wall, she wrote, like frozen music waiting to dance. When she read her words aloud, her patterns glowed with pride. David had never seen a Zephyrian look proud before. "This is poetry," she said with wonder. "I created something that did not exist before." But not everyone was happy about the changes. Elder Merton called emergency council meetings every day. The other elders were divided. Some, like Elder Cassana, wanted to send David away immediately. Others were curious about what was happening to their people. "Our workers are becoming inefficient," Elder Cassana reported during one meeting. The crystal farmers spent an entire day arranging their crops in what they call beautiful patterns instead of maximizing harvest yields. "The engineers are worse," added Elder Thones. "They designed a bridge that serves no purpose except to look nice when the sun set behind it." Elder Merton's patterns were constantly red with stress. "And the palace guards have started something they call singing. They make harmonious sounds while they work. It is completely illogical. But Elder Zareth, the youngest council member, spoke differently. Perhaps we should consider that these changes might not be harmful. Our people seem happier. Happiness is chemical brain dysfunction, Elder Cassana snapped. Is it? Elder Zareth asked. I have been watching the affected Zephyrians. They work with more energy. They solve problems in new ways. Yesterday, a maintenance worker found a solution to our water recycling issue by thinking about how rain falls in patterns. David heard about these meetings from Princess Veltara. She told him that the entire empire was beginning to split into two groups. Those who embraced the new way of thinking, and those who feared it, the artists. Princess Veltara said, "That is what we call ourselves now, and the others call themselves the protectors." Artists, David smiled. I like that. We have been creating things, David. So many things. Her patterns glow with excitement, music, pictures, stories, even new ways of dancing. It is like we have been asleep our whole lives and now we are awake. But the awakening was not peaceful. Reports came from across the empire of conflicts between artists and protectors. Some cities were divided, with different districts following different philosophies. A few planets had stopped communicating with the capital completely. The crisis came to a head when Princess Veltara announced she wanted to make changes to the laws of the empire. We should allow time for creative expression, she told the council. Schools should teach imagination alongside logic. Art should be valued equally with science. Elder Merton stood up angrily. Princess, you are the heir to the throne. You cannot make such radical changes based on alien contamination. It is not contamination. Princess Veltara's patterns flashed with anger. It is evolution. We have discovered a new way of thinking, a way that makes our people weak and inefficient, a way that makes our people complete. David watched this argument through his crystal wall. He felt guilty about causing such conflict, but he also felt amazed. The Zephyrians were discovering parts of themselves they never knew existed. That evening, Princess Veltara came to his room looking exhausted. Her patterns were dim and sad. The council has voted, she said. They want to send you back to Earth immediately. They believe removing you will stop the changes. And what do you think? David asked. I think it is too late for that. She smiled sadly. You cannot take back a song once it has been sung. You cannot make someone forget a dream once they have dreamed it. She was right. Over the following days, David saw that the creative awakening had taken on a life of its own. Zephyrians who had never met him were beginning to experiment with art and imagination. They shared their creations with others, spreading the ideas faster than any government could control. Princess Veltara showed David some of the art being created across the empire. There were sculptures that served no purpose except beauty, music that told stories without words, paintings that captured emotions instead of facts. Look at this, she said, showing him a data crystal. A farmer on the Outer Rim sent this. He created a song about his crops growing. Listen. The crystal played a simple melody that somehow captured the feeling of plants reaching toward sunlight. David felt tears in his eyes. This is beautiful, he said. He has never heard human music. Princess Veltara said, he invented this completely on his own. The capacity was always inside him, inside all of us. Your words just helped us find it. But the protectors were organizing too. Elder Merton had contacted other species in the galaxy, warning them about the human mental virus. Some species were interested in studying the phenomenon. Others were afraid and wanted to quarantine all contact with humanity. There are reports of similar awakenings on other worlds, Princess Veltara told David. Species that have had contact with human art are beginning to experience their own creative thoughts. David realized that what had started as an accident was becoming something much larger. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy was not technology or military strength. It was the simple act of imagining impossible things and finding joy in creation. One morning, Princess Veltara brought David news that changed everything. The council has made their final decision. She said, they are going to exile me for supporting the artistic movement. Elder Cassana will become the new heir. Can they do that if they vote unanimously? Yes. Her pattern showed determination mixed with sadness. But I have made a decision too. What decision? Princess Veltara smiled, and David saw something in her expression that reminded him of human determination. I am going to start a new colony, she said, a place where artists can live freely and create without fear. Many Zephyrians want to join me. We will call it the Creative Alliance. David stared at her. You would give up your throne for this? David, she said softly. You have shown me that there are things more valuable than power. The right to dream, to create, to imagine, these are worth any sacrifice. She paused, then added, and we want you to help us build this new world. Will you teach us more about the human way of thinking? David looked at this alien princess who had been transformed by simple human poetry. He thought about the galaxy, full of logical species who had never learned to dream. He thought about the possibility of a new kind of civilization, one built on both logic and imagination. Yes, he said, I will help you. Princess Veltara's patterns exploded with joy, more beautiful than any sunset David had ever seen. 5 years later, David stood on the observation deck of New Haven Station, watching ships from dozens of different species arrive and depart. The station floated in space between 3 star systems, serving as the headquarters of the Creative Alliance. What had started as a small colony of exiled Zephyrians had grown into something nobody could have imagined. The Morning Report ambassador, said Crix, a young Corellan who served as David's assistant. Crix's species had always been focused on data organization, but now he created beautiful charts that looked like works of art, while still containing all the necessary information. Thank you, Crix. David took the data pad and smiled. The report was written in both logical format and poetry. Even official documents had become creative expressions. The numbers were amazing. Over 3 million beings from 47 different species now lived in Creative Alliance territories. They had established colonies on 68 planets and built dozens of space stations like New Haven. But the most incredible part was what they had accomplished together. Princess Veltara, now called Director Veltara, had kept her promise. The Creative Alliance was a place where any being could explore their imagination freely. Zephyrians worked alongside Thrinks, Vexani, and Corellans, species that had barely interacted before were now collaborating on art projects, musical compositions, and storytelling festivals. David walked through the station's main corridor, which had become a living art gallery. The walls displayed paintings, sculptures, and light installations created by beings from across the galaxy. Music played softly in the background, not the efficient communication sounds most species used, but actual songs that told stories and expressed emotions. He stopped at a large viewing window where a group of young beings from different species were working together on a sculpture. A Zephyrian child was teaching a Vexani child how to make patterns with colored light. A young Thranic was showing them both how to make the sculpture move and dance. Beautiful. Is it not? Director Veltara approached from behind. Her patterns now flowed constantly in colors that had no names in the old Zephyrian language. She had learned to express emotions that her species had never felt before. It's incredible. David said, when I dropped that journal in your library, I never imagined it would lead to this. Nor did I, she smiled, another expression that had been unknown to Zephyrians 5 years ago. But perhaps that is the beauty of imagination. It always surprises us. They walked together toward the central hub of the station, where the Grand Assembly Hall was located. Today was a special day. Representatives from 12 new species were arriving to learn about creative expression. Word of the Creative Alliance had spread across the galaxy, and more species were discovering that they too had hidden creative capacities. How are the negotiations with the Galactic Council going? David asked. Better than expected, Director Veltara replied. Even some of the protector species are beginning to see the benefits of our approach. The Corellans reported a 30% increase in problem-solving efficiency. After allowing their people creative time, the Vexani have developed new technologies. By combining logical thinking with imaginative approaches, they passed through the Academy District. where the first Galactic Academy of Creative Arts had been established. David could see classrooms where beings of all species learned to paint, write, compose music, and explore their imaginations. Teachers from dozens of worlds shared their unique perspectives on creativity. In one classroom, an elderly Threnic was teaching young students from various species how to tell stories. In another, a group of Zephyrians and humans were collaborating on a musical composition that combined logical mathematical patterns with emotional expression. The most surprising development, Director Veltara continued, is that creativity has made our technology better, not worse. When engineers are allowed to imagine impossible things, they sometimes find ways to make the impossible real. David nodded. He had seen the evidence himself. Creative Alliance ships were more efficient than traditional designs because their creators had imagined new solutions to old problems. Buildings were stronger because architects had dreamed of structures that looked like living things. Even food production had improved when farmers began thinking about their crops as works of art. They reached the Grand Assembly Hall just as the new species delegations were arriving. David watched with wonder as beings he had never seen before stepped off their ships, their faces or face equivalents filled with curiosity and hope. Ambassador Chen, one of the delegates, approached. She was tall and silver-skinned, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like stars. I am Speaker Lith, of the Asterian Republic. We have traveled far to learn about this imagination that your species discovered. Actually, David said gently, every species has imagination. Humans just never learn to suppress it. The delegate's eyes grew brighter. You mean we might already possess this ability? I'm certain you do. Would you like me to read you a story? Within an hour, Speaker Lith was experiencing her first creative thoughts. Her species communicated through patterns of light, and as David read from his journal, her skin began to glow with colors and patterns that none of her people had ever seen before. This is wonderful, she whispered, tears of light flowing down her face. I can see possibilities I never knew existed. Director Veltara smiled and handed the delegate a writing pad. Now try creating something yourself. As the day continued, David watched 12 new species take their first steps into the world of imagination. Some wrote simple poems, others drew pictures, a few composed basic melodies. All of them experienced the joy of creating something that had never existed before. That evening, David sat in his quarters, updating his journal, the same leather book that had started everything. He wrote about the day's events, about the wonder he had seen in the eyes of new species discovering their creative potential. Director Veltara visited him as she did every evening. What are you writing about today? I'm trying to capture what all this means, David said. 5 years ago, your people thought human creativity was a dangerous mental virus. Now it's spreading across the galaxy, and everywhere it goes. It makes life richer and more beautiful. It has certainly made my life richer, Director Veltara said. I used to think existence was only about efficiency and logic. Now I know it is about joy, wonder, beauty, and the endless possibility of creating something new. David looked out his window at the busy space station, at the ships arriving and departing, carrying creative ideas to every corner of the galaxy. Sometimes I think about what might have happened if I hadn't dropped that journal. Then I think about all the species who would still be living half-lives, never knowing the joy of imagination. Director Veltara replied, your clumsiness may have been the most important accident in galactic history. David laughed. I prefer to think of it as destiny. Destiny, Director Veltara repeated the word thoughtfully. I like that concept, the idea that something is meant to happen, written in the stars like a cosmic poem. As the night cycle began on the station, David made his final entry in the journal. Today, 12 more species took their first steps into the universe of imagination. Tomorrow, there will be more. The galaxy is waking up from a long sleep, learning to dream again. And perhaps that is humanity's greatest gift, not our technology or our strength, but our stubborn refusal to stop believing in impossible things. The stars whisper secrets that only the heart can hear. And finally, the galaxy is learning to listen. Outside his window, The lights of 1,000 ships painted patterns across the darkness, carrying dreams and stories and songs to worlds that had never known such things existed. The galaxy was becoming a more beautiful place, one poem at a time.